how's it going today? Wanted to do something that had been kind of on my mind for a while. So I started playing the Final Fantasy trading card game close to the end of Opus VII. At the time, I didn't really know how Opuses work, but I remember I got one of the starter kits. It came with like the little black deck box with the crystal on it. And Opus VIII was releasing like a few months later. So Opus VIII was kind of like my first real introduction to it, because like I said, I saw on the tail end of 7. So I thought it'd be fun today to rank the last 5 opuses, which just happen to be the 5 opuses that I've been a part of. So we got Opus 8, 9, 10, 11, and currently 12. So I know 12, we're still technically in the middle of that. I'm well aware of that, but I've seen enough of it. And obviously there's no competitive season, so it's not like, well, we gotta wait for a tournament to see, to make some good thoughts on it. So this is going to be my ranking of the last 5 opuses, 8 through 12. And there will be a couple factors in this ranking. There's no defining, basically there will be, were there cards I enjoyed playing. The overall thing we're going for is that how much fun did I have playing in this opus? And that's not from a competitive sense, like, oh, well, did I have fun at Worlds? Well, I didn't go to Worlds, so of course not. And I don't really care about, like, the super competitive scene. That'll factor a little bit into it, but basically just how much I personally enjoyed each of these opuses. So, shall we? All right, so at the very bottom of our list is Opus XI. Opus XI was, there's a big asterisk over it, okay? We'll get that right out of the way, is that, it's the opus that we couldn't play in person for. And yes, Opus XII has that too, but it really hit Opus XI the hardest because, 11, we didn't get to touch it at all, and it was right at the start of the virus, and man, it was just a big old pain, and so learning Octagon and all those other things. So yes, Opus XII does suffer from this too. However, Opus XI also had just such a lack of variety. Like, it was so painful to play in it because very quickly everyone discovered just how crazy good, BFA and March Ritz and Kadaj were, and then those decks were just everywhere. And I pretty much spent most of the opus trying to figure out ways to best those decks, which basically was impossible. Not that they were unbeatable, anything can be beaten, but there was definitely, like, you'll never come out ahead against that deck. It has just such efficiency, and it's always going to have the CP advantage kind of thing. So for that reason alone, like, Opus 11 was just a slog. Also, it went on the longest out of any of the opuses. Assuming things stay on schedule, I believe Opus 13 is supposed to hit in March sometime. So, Opus 12 will be roughly the same length as Opus 10. But Opus 11, God, just went on forever. March to, was it the end of October or November? And it was just, again, it was these same cards over and over again. There was nothing to watch because we were all stuck at home. So all of those things combined to just make Opus 11 an absolute slog to get through. Now, there were some things. For example, I did like a lot of the 15 cards that got added, in particular, like the Kingsglaive package. I thought was really enjoyable. The monster counters were kind of meh. Like, counters didn't really change much about anything, like, because that still ultimately involved you just playing more cards later than you would want to see these counter cards, but they were still mostly enjoyable. The thing was too, I really wasn't into the 7 remake a whole lot. Like, I hadn't even bought the game. I wouldn't play it till much later down the line, so I didn't really care that it was so focused on the 7 remake and all these new 7 cards, which to me felt overtuned. It was like, it felt like they were pushing all the 7 cards just to sell the video games. I didn't like that aspect of it. Yeah, so there just wasn't much about Opus 11 that I enjoyed. All right, number 4 on our countdown, we have Opus 9. This opus is kind of hard to remember. Like, as I'm reflecting on it, I was just like, gee, what did people even play during this opus? There were some cards that made a bit of a splash, such as the Fusoya legend, I remember, was really popular. Like, both the Lightning legends were kind of interesting, Fusoya and Maya. And while I never saw a ton of use, I really liked the water legends in both Rosa and Ultros. You had some neat things like Yasmat, the Wind Legend. There was some, like, I really liked the Rem Cadet card from that opus. Ice got a huge boost with Lassie Dragon Soryu. He was a really nice card. And man, I remember when Vayne came out and we were all freaking out about Vayne. Like, oh my goodness. Like, half the people were like, this card's not very good. And some were like, oh my God, it's broken. I remember I particularly thought it was broken because the card didn't state that, I was still somewhat acclimating to the rules at that point, and because the card didn't state that it was only while Vayne was on the field, I thought it was kind of like an entry effect that you played him, and then every card your opponent had just immediately got taxed, and it would stay that way until those cards disappeared. But no, it's only while he's on the field, so obviously it's much easier to get rid of it that. And it's funny because, like, the first part of this meta was dominated by Wind, Water, the mill strategy, and they ended up banning Riku halfway through this Opus. I think when the Opus X starter decks came out, like with the Terra, and the Cloud of Darkness and the Onion Knight. And so people were playing this mill game. Now, that never really blew up at my locals, so I don't really think of the Opus for that, even though I know competitively that was used a lot. And it was fun because I got to see my personal buddy Cody Snodgrass get his Worlds invite during this Opus. He won the Gen Con tournament. And I remember I came home after work and he was like winning it, and they kept putting him on stream, so I got like this personal cheer of like, yeah, Cody, go for it. He ended up taking that tournament with Mono Ice, of course, because that's who he is. He's the Mono Ice guy. So that was really exciting. But other than that, like, I don't really remember what I played. Like, I couldn't tell you much about it. Also, there were some monsters in this Opus. I remember it was all these monsters that, like, were only forwards on your turn, which was kind of neat, but ultimately ended up being a detriment, although I still use that Malboro. I think he's really cool. So overall, a very, like, inoffensive Opus. Like, it was just fine. It was there. Like I said, I don't really remember a whole lot about it. But yeah, it was just what it was. Oh, one thing about this Opus, though, that was interesting is that this was the only time in the 5 Opuses since I've been playing that the light and dark cards didn't really make an impact, which was very interesting. Probably the most used card you saw was the Emperor Gestalt Dark Backup, and he really wasn't even used that much, but, like, the wall was really lackluster, and the Chaos, like, nobody really cared about that. Like, so it was funny because in every other Opus set, the light and dark cards, make a huge splash. So it was honestly kind of refreshing, like, oh, light and dark isn't ruling the day here. Good stuff. All right, number 3 on our list, smack dab in the middle, is Opus VIII. Opus VIII was the first Opus I really got the full scope of, so I was very early in my TCG career here with Final Fantasy. It's funny, I would love to be able to go back and, like, watch myself learning the game, because I'm sure I just made a bunch of boneheaded plays, but a lot of it is because I didn't know what I was doing. I'll never forget my very first match. I went up to this local station. Nobody knew who I was, and I found a guy. I was like, hey, do you have a moment to, like, kind of teach me the game in between your tournament matches? He's like, sure. And so I was like, okay, so what do I draw? I draw, like, 5 cards, and I looked at my hand, and again, I didn't know what anything in this game was or did. So I was just like, okay. I just laid my hand on the table. I said, so what do I do? And then he kind of guided me through it. But Opus VIII had the Earth 15 characters, which I really liked a lot. And gosh, what else did it have? It was kind of nice because 15 and 14 were the 2 games I had played the most recently. I'm a huge Final Fantasy nut, pretty much played them all. But 15 and 14 were the games I'd played most recently, so to have the 14 starter set with, like, Lise and Hien in it, and then to see these 15 cards, it was almost like this nice little welcoming in, because I was like, oh yeah, I know this, I just played these games. So that was kind of exciting for me, and I got to, have a lot of fun just experiencing the game. I'll still remember, even pretty early, the one thing about this Opus is it was Veritas the meta. Like, Veritas was just everywhere, like every deck, because, I mean, he was dark, so of course you could fit him into anything, like Mono Water Veritas, Mono Ice Veritas, like, it was just in every conceivable thing you could think of. Like, legit, the only debate about Veritas, as far as, like, using him versus not using, is how many you ran. Some people would only run 1. Most people ran 2, from what I saw. Some people ran 3. They're like, why not? I want him to come in and out as much as I possibly could, so... But it was a very enjoyable meta. Like, I have fond memories of learning it and discovering things and, like, figuring out how the stack works and, like, wait, what? No, I just cast this Titan to make my guy 2k more, and my buddy's like, well, I'm doing Glaciolabalist to kill it before it gets that buff. I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. I just buffed it. How could you kill it? Like, yeah. It was fun times. But yeah, even then reflecting on it, there's still some neat cards in there that I really like. Water got a nice boost that set with like the Leviathan and Nickel. I thought Luna Frey was really good, and the Opus VIII Legends of Dane, which was like one of the first legends I pulled from a pack, was still a really neat card and is still relevant today. So I liked Opus VIII a lot. It, obviously I had no prior thing to compare it to, but it was a very good introductory opus for me. Had some monsters. Again, it let me see a lot of different parts of the game, which I really enjoyed. So Opus VIII, right in the middle, gets a big thumbs up from me. All right, number 2 on our list is our current opus, Opus XII. And that's pretty high praise considering that, we're still in lockdown. There still isn't any, tournaments to watch. I have gotten to play in person with friends a few times, but for the most part, but why do I like Opus 12 so much? It's honestly because of the variety. And maybe you could say that's enhanced by the fact that it came after Opus 11. Sure, that's very fair. Opus 11 was, to me, so stale that Opus 12 has felt like such a breath of fresh air. And don't get me wrong, like, I'm kind of a balance honk, and there's some just nutty stuff in this set. You've got stuff like the Shikaris. Most of the multi-element cards are just ridiculous. Locke, Ishtola, Neo X Death is just a silly card. It's like, why would you print that? And despite all that, I've seen so much variety. Party attacking. Oh my goodness. Look at what they've done for party attacking. Look at tribals and archetypes. Samurais are just these big threats. Dragoons really have a place now, and they only got really 2 new cards. And, I loved Warriors of Light since Opus 10, and so to have them get this great boost in Ferris, like, you've got these lightning water party attacks with Yuna and Mid-Previa. You've got these wind party attack with Bart Spoko. You've got Warriors of Light that's not focused on my version. That's like a Lena Bart Spoko version, which is so neat. You've got these Shikari decks. You've got this stupid infinite loop combo, which I can't stand at all, but again, it is something else. You've got these storm decks, Earth, Wind, Ice shenanigans forever. It's just crazy. Like, they really, really did a good job with variety, and it's shown in the player base. I've played a lot of matches on Octagon in person, and I never know what my opponent's going to use, which is really exciting. Whereas, again, in Opus 11, it was every single deck was the exact same over and over and over again. So just major props to them for, making party attacking relevant. It's kind of like this thing. So, like, in a TCG where, what they call power creep coming in, right? And, I mean, generally, I don't really like power creep in general, but when you have something like Opus 11, you have, like, just these few cards that stand out way above the rest, so everything else has to, fall short of them. Whereas Opus 12, it felt like they gave a lot of things a big boost, which, I mean, I guess that's the only thing you're going to do, right? If you're not going to pull the power level back, then when you push it, push a lot of things. Don't just push, one handful of cards, and then that's going to be your new exciting thing. Let's give a bunch of cards a boost, and I think that's what helped so many decks find relevancy, and just, yeah, I've enjoyed it. It's been very fun. I've enjoyed it. It's a shame, we won't kind of get to see that official season of it. Opus 12 especially, like, I don't miss that there wasn't an Opus 11 season, just because who cared about Opus 11? At least I didn't. But Opus 12 has so many exciting things in it, so hopefully we'll get to see a lot of it sticking around for a while. Yeah, it was very, very interesting, and I'm very much enjoying being a part of it. And last, but certainly not least, quite the opposite, in fact, it's our number 1. That is, ladies and gentlemen, Opus X, Ancient Champions. Man, I loved Opus X. It's funny because it kind of came in a weird time in my life, or like in my personal life, and specifically my work life. It's kind of going through some ups and downs, but maybe that's why I enjoyed it so much. There was just, I don't know, there's something about this opus that was really neat. So from a competitive standpoint, you had things like Waff and Rampier and, Windwater, and they were definitely ruling the day, and they had their shenanigans. But, as strong as those were, again, I still appreciated the variety that was found within the set. And in particular, one thing I really liked is, as I said before, I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan, and this set really focused on, like, the main characters of Final Fantasy, which I really appreciated. They had a lot of... Lightning got a new card, not that she needed a new card. I love the new Refia that made me start playing a Warriors of Light deck based on that, with the backup Sarah backing it up. The new Gilgamesh in Water was great. The new Ash Legend in Water was great. Ice got this great Squall card. Fire got this Ifrit that just felt like, oh, finally, this Ifrit. And even though he got totally overshadowed by Waff, like the Zondi card was really neat too. Like, and again, these were all big Final Fantasy characters that it just made the set so much more enjoyable. It's like, oh, I know these characters. Like, I want to play with these people. Whereas sometime, you've got a bunch of characters from some of the lesser known games or a lot of the mobile games, and I'm just like, I don't even know who these people are. So, and Opus X went on just a little longer. I think, I don't know the actual day count, but Opus X came out right before Worlds, and then it went all the way through March. And so we got a bit of an extended period, which for me was really great because, again, I enjoyed playing in that Opus so much. I remember I would just run this mono fire deck with like Bergen and the Geomancer backup and the new Ifrit, and it's had a really fun time piloting that. It was still fun to use my Scions of the Seventh Dawn there. It was fun to use the brand new Warriors of Light deck. Like, yeah, it was just, for me, a really enjoyable Opus. And also, I think as a player, too, at that point, I was really comfortable. I was like, okay, I pretty much know all the rules at this point. Like, I can actually tell other people, that's not how the stack works. Like, this is how this resolves, which was very satisfying. And, it's, as of right now, the last Opus we got to play in person. So it was something that you were still going up there to the weekly shop. But, yeah. I made some new friends during that Opus. Like in our local group, we've got some particular people that showed up. My good buddy Steve, gosh, I miss him. And so it was just overall, it was very enjoyable. I had a great time with Opus X. I think it had some really fun cards. And yeah, that's why it's at the top of my list. Thank you so much for watching it. I want to ask you, tell me in the comments, what was your favorite Opus and why? Do you go just based off the meta scene? Did you have a particular card or a deck type that you liked using? Was it because a certain card didn't exist that you didn't have to face against all the time? Just let me know your reasons. Really appreciate it. And I'll catch you later.